Continuing our series on lessons that we've learned from our dogs, we're moving on to Tracker, beginning with his lessons, which were many, but Jenny and I picked out a couple each, 3, in fact, that were at the top of our list. So I'm going to let Jenny go first with what was the first lesson that you learned from our Tracker boy?
Well, I wrote down believe in your dreams. And I truly think that that was the beginning with Tracker, because we each had a dream of having a champion dog, what we came into this from.
Yeah.
You with Goldens and me with my Newfoundland. And, that was why we selected Tracker, or Tracker selected us. We had to come back to that believing in your dream many times throughout Tracker's life.
Yeah.
Even from the very beginning, because Tracker was exactly who he grew up to be, with that impish, boyish, going to push you to your limits from probably the first time we met him. And we had many conversations of whether we were ready for him. And we're experienced dog people, from obedience and, training. And we saw Tracker exactly as he was when he was still in his litter.
Yeah.
Are we ready for him? And I think that kind of set the tone going forward with that dream, wanting that confirmation dog, that champion, and learning along the way. And the dreams that came about as each chapter kind of opened up, and we were able to discover that there were many facets of the dog world and beyond the dog world, getting on TV.
Gosh. Yeah, exactly.
Kind of like with a seed of one, this is what we want. And then
something simple as we like a champion dog, AKC champion dog.
Yes. And, then the dreams just kind of went from there with the different competitions and being able to have this journey with him that took us like Westminster. I mean, that being like, oh my gosh, Westminster, the National Dog Show, watching it on TV and, Tracker competing there for the first time and having him in the top 20, and who would have thought when we first were looking for that confirmation dog that we'd travel with him to California twice, and all the adventures in between.
Kind of covered in a different way. I said, go for it and really it was about the dreams, and similar to what you're talking about, starting with something very basic and genuine. Wanted a champion dog and not realizing how hard that is. People might think it looks easy, but it isn't. A ton of effort goes into that, a lot of competition. But I think the eye-opening experience was when he was 7 months old, and it was only his second show. We went to the National, and as a puppy, he won one of his classes against 30 other puppies. And it was really fascinating to just experience that. And then a couple days later, we went to the top 20 event there. I mean, that's where that dream was born. I literally felt like I got this download of he belongs there. And that's the kind of dog we have right now. It has that kind of capacity and potential. And it just stuck with me, was implanted, and all. I looked around at it, and we didn't know many people at all. A couple people at our table, and that was it. Looking at all these strangers and all these dogs that we've come to know very well, since that time, which would have been in 2011, so 13 years ago, that there was so much more to it, but to go for it, not to shut it off. And there were downsides and consequences from pursuing that, and major challenges to get to the next level and next level. But that he led us through, like, he knew where he was going, and we didn't, or I didn't. I had no clue that whole world existed. So, but when I had the glimpse at the top 20 gala and had the simultaneous experience of him winning an event at the national, it was very clear that those were symbols or indicators of the path. And as long as he was go for it, keep going for it, embracing the challenges instead of, what we've seen since then is a lot of people do some things with their dogs and then they go do something else and they don't pursue it. And that's fine. Only you have to have a lot in you to do this, like what we did with Tracker and some of the obstacles that came up. But that, just go for it. Go for it as far as you can go. And as each door opens up, go for that and take it as far as you can. It's a huge lesson. And I teach goal setting. I've taught it for 40 years and, embrace that in a certain way, but to experience it in this fashion was really a lesson. And it was very clear that he was leading us and taking us there because he just loved the ring.
Yeah. He knew.
He knew that's where he belonged. Contrary to Sky that we've already covered, she knew she knew that's for him and not for her, but different video. So okay. Anyway, so second lesson.
Be open to learning. From the moment Tracker came home with us, we had to be open to learning with him because every day was a new day. And I will really never forget, really happy that puppy kindergarten started right away. And I remember going to class the first time you and I went, suburban training club, and we had Tracker and all the treats. And that first class was sitting and listening. And
not his thing.
It was not his thing. It was, I probably was crying at one point going, what are we doing? I'm trying to keep him busy and listen, and all we're doing is sitting and somebody is talking to us and we're not doing anything. And then we had puppy play at the end and it was like, oh, thank you. Let him burn this energy off. But I was really thinking, what did we get ourselves into here? And from then it became, the next class was better. We had things to do and we got homework, yay, from a teacher perspective, because I needed to be practicing some things because Tracker really was very different than my Newfoundlands and my lab. And, it was a new experience, but the other part of the learning that I thought was, the many pieces of being open to learning was he learned it so quickly. So we'd practice it and I was used to repetition, doing it again and again and again. And Tracker was like, I got it. What else you have? I got that. What else do you have? And then he would get impish and we had to practice those skills in so many different places, between the traditional sits and downs. But I distinctly remember he was the mouthiest dog I had ever had.
Yes.
He had his mouth us all the time and we were doing all the right things, replacing and, treats and dangling. And I remember sitting outside and we had just learned leave it in class. And and he's like, yeah, I got it. I leave that on the ground. I won't take it. And I was like, I want him to leave my arm alone. And I remember putting yogurt on my arm and practicing leave it with my arm. And that then became an epiphany of there's an application, looking at the basic things that we were learning. And then how do we apply them in the world that we're living in? Because truly, you can learn all these foundational skills and they do great in class. And then you have to live with this. Tracker was the first to teach me many of those things. The leave it, how do we do it in the world? But I think the funniest one, and not so funny at the time because lots of Tracker's learning came with tears. We were down at Warrior Canine and we had Tracker and Sky and we had done an evaluation with a group of other golden owners and people, and they were like, let's take the dog swimming in the creek. And yeah, sure, let's go. We had Tracker and Sky on long lines and everybody was saying, they'll be fine, let them go. I remember our guts were going, I don't know. And we had been training recalls. We had been practicing. We were in class. And so we hooked them, and they were fine
For a
until
while.
I can still see Tracker chasing the toy in the creek, and it went a little bit farther than it had gone before. And I can still see that boy turn around and look at me. And in my head, I'm like, we're screwed. And he's going. And Sky went, well, if he's going, I'm going. And there they went downstream. That recall that we
Yes.
thought was really
Yep.
solid was
Was
not.
not.
And we got them back, and we had a little conversation, Tracker and I. And the next day we made a phone call to Sharon from Suburban,
yes,
and
right.
did some private lessons on recall. To this day, we practice our over and over and over again in so many different situations to make that be safe and solid. But Tracker must have known that we needed to learn that lesson.
Exactly. Well, he came with a plethora of lessons for sure. My second one was perseverance, and kind of applies to a lot of this, like persevering through all the learning, persevering through the ups and the downs, which were many in a lot of different ways. But I was always good at persevering. That was something I had a lot of persistence. But this, the maximum possible, stay in there, hang in there, persevere, things will turn around, it'll get better, keep applying the new lesson. It's like, here's a lesson. I gave you that lesson last time. You didn't learn that. So do another one, and just keep learning, learning, and persevering through all of that to get to the place, really through his whole life, the arc of life cycle, and coming into his senior years where everything just falling into place with all of those lessons. And you could just see, he's like, you have learned. Very good, little grasshoppers. I have taught you all well, and now I'm going to enjoy my retirement. But that aspect of perseverance, thinking that you have a lesson under your belt, and then he comes along and it's like, yeah, you can go, you can climb another mountain with that.
Let's push it a little farther.
Let's go.
That's
so
good, yeah.
I'm going to jump to my third one and just flip it around a little bit here. One of those, the third lesson, and it fits in with the other comments that I've made, and that is respecting boundaries. And very specifically, he was the kind of dog that didn't like dogs in his face. Everybody thinks that golden retrievers love every dog, and people are like, oh, they don't think about the aspect of a dog that is similar to a child, and that is the expectation of dogs liking every dog and letting dogs run up to them in their face. And he did not like that from the beginning of his life. He's like, just don't get in my face. Don't get in my face. Please respect my boundaries. And then he reflected that. I'm sure you have some examples here of how he would look at us like, hey, those people aren't respecting boundaries. That dog, that person, that over there. Like, he knew that, not only for himself, but others. He's like, hey, everybody should be respecting boundaries here. And that was a hard lesson, just like it would be for any, particularly a golden retriever, a very friendly type of dog owner, that there are differences. And it's, a dog can then have its own reactions to that are more like animals, like growling, like baring its teeth. And that you have to respect those signals that they're giving you. And as we learned that the hard way, and for a while, Tracker had a reputation, of being a reactive dog. And there's a reason for that, with other dogs basically attacking him. But all in all, it was about respecting him. And then it's like, look, I like to be famous, but I do not need to have every dog in my face. And as a person, neither do we. We don't come up to people and get this close. It would be highly offensive to do that, where somehow in the world we think that's okay with dogs, and it just plain isn't. So I think that respecting boundaries, and that, applies all across the board with people as well. Respecting people's boundaries in small ways and large ways. And it's just a great reminder of healthy relationships. So that was my third one, and very powerful. And all three have been, but that one is an overarching lesson.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Yeah. And that really helped us as breeders in educating our puppy families about this world that has changed. You know, it seems to have like shifted to, oh, my dog's friendly. My dog can come and greet your dog. It's no, you know, and I think that, you know, part of maybe what Tracker's gift to us was for as hard as that time period was in working with him after he was attacked, it was a way that we then learned and educated ourselves to, wait a minute, it's not okay for people to not be in control of their own dogs.
Right.
And, you know, even when that happened in class, when I had that instance with somebody who was a very experienced person that was not in control of their dog in class.
Yeah.
And it was, wait, my job when I'm with my dog out in the world, it is my dog and me.
Right.
That's it. And it's my job to protect him and watch over him. So no, it's not okay for you to bring your dog over here. And that respecting boundaries, we've been able to draw strength from to communicate to our families to help them to go, no, it's not okay.
Right.
And here's a way that you can do it in a respectful way. Teach.
And it doesn't matter what, you know, you don't even need to find out whether your dog is going to not like puppies or, you know, or dogs in their face. It's just respecting their boundaries, period.
That's it. Yeah.
That's
what it is.
That the expectation is set properly. You're out working with your dog, enjoying your dog. This is not playtime.
Right.
And that you can pick playtime.
Right.
And kind of an extension of that is some dogs, golden retrievers included, only have a small circle of friends. And they just like certain dogs. And others they don't like, just like people. And somehow I think that's a big message to get through.
Yes.
But a lot of our puppy families have learned that. It's like certain dogs, this is their, you know, close circle, just like people, you know, more like an introverted type person, where it's just, you know, small circle of friends or one or two. And that's great. That's, you know, what they need. And others are just like, get me out. I want to meet everybody. I want to be friends with everybody. And they're on the other side of the spectrum. But that's a very outgoing, gregarious, different kind of dog. And not all Goldens are like that. You know, if we're talking about Goldens, I think people have this stereotype that they're going to love everybody and want to be with everybody and, you know, people and kids and babies and every other kind of dog. And it's just not true.
That's right.
So that's a mega lesson.
Yes.
You know, in there about dogs and dog behavior and respecting the dog.
Thank you, Tracker.
So thank you, Tracker. I think we passed.
Well, my last one was finding joy. That's one thing I was very hard to do at the beginning with Tracker. It goes back to the learning and finding that joy in, even when he's being his most impish self, you know, time goes so fast. And, you know, I look back at pictures, you know, as doing that, getting ready for this and, you know, seeing that picture of him sitting in the refrigerator as a little puppy. And, you know, we laugh.
Like the air conditioning vents.
We laugh at that, you know, but that was him being impish. And, you know, when it snowed, his snow angels.
Oh my gosh.
And he would roll and roll and roll in that snow, and his head would pop up full of snow, just that smile on his face. And then he would do that when I'd mow the grass, and he would make grass angels and have the grass stains down his face.
I send a couple pictures to our handlers.
Yeah, like,
glad he's off this weekend.
We're going to scrub. And I think that was a lesson that he gave to me that it took me a while to learn. It was a hard one because I was so focused on that dream part of, you know, in all honesty, like leaving a show, like packed up. I'd have everything packed up before you guys got back to the setup, when I'd be so disappointed in an outcome. And I really had to find a way to find that joy to go, wait a minute, it's the game. And It took me a while. I wrote down a couple experiences because it seemed like I always had these lure coursing when we would go. And the first couple times he was great. He would chase the bag and he'd run and run and run. He'd, you cross the finish line and I'd be able to grab him. And we had a favorite person with lure coursing. Probably one of the last couple times he would figured out, here is his intelligence, that when the starter, the judge is up on like a ladder and the finish line is there, he learned that that's where the game ends. And I don't think I want the game to end. So he would cross the finish line and look back and then run. Now, yes, we did practice recalls. And yes, we had much training. But when you're in that impish play mode of, I don't want the game to be over, he would run around and come just close enough that it would be, I almost got him. And I can still see Diane laughing. And it was probably one of his last times that he ran. And I caught him and she just hugged him to pieces. And she said, I just love you, Tracker. Yeah. And, love your just love spirit. And I will always remember that going, why get upset? Who cares? That wanting, that seeing his joy, just that spirit. And the other one that sticks out in my mind was when I was competing in obedience with him. And the poor ring steward, I'm doing my off-lead healing, took a water bottle and was crinkling it up to throw it away. And Tracker was like, oh, toy. Left the ring to go find the toy. That you don't qualify, when that happens. And the poor ring steward was so apologetic. But, it becomes part of the story, the good stories that you tell. Right. And I did learn in class, it's like, well, nobody wants to hear that you got 100 and you were perfect. We all bond over those stories that we remember. And Tracker did have a lot of DQ stories. I did have tears, but I had to find that joy in telling the story now with fond memories of it was a game. And having to learn that. Yes. So I'm carrying that forward, Tracker, with your great granddaughter Moxie.
Yes.
Remembering,
we did get you back.
Find the joy.
That's right.
So exactly. Those were my lessons.
Very good. All right. Well, while there are other ones, I think this covers 3 each to really digest. It gives you a good flavor about Tracker. And we thank you guys for watching and tuning in.